Welcome to the Enneagram 2.0 podcast. I'm Beatrice Chestnut.
And I'm Uranio Paes.
And today we're talking to a great friend of ours, Maddy Dray. And Maddy's going to talk about her experience as a millennial with the Enneagram. And so we're going to talk to her about...
Millennial. On the cusp of Gen Z.
Yes, she's a young millennial, really close to Gen Z. So she's maybe can cover both groups.
Or a little bit of neither. Who knows?
Exactly. We'll see what comes of it. But the point is to have a conversation about how she got into the Enneagram, what it's done for her, why she likes it, and also what she sees with her friends and her generation in terms of how did they use the Enneagram that might be similar or different from the ways that other age groups and other cohorts, draw on the Enneagram.
Yeah. So happy to have you here, Maddy. We really needed some fresh air here on our podcast.
Yeah, a change from us oldsters. Maddy is the daughter of a really close friend of mine. And so it's been a pleasure to watch her grow from a baby. And also it was really exciting for me when she got really into the Enneagram when she was about 17. And started, asking questions and coming to panels and doing all kinds of things. So it's thrilling for me to be able to talk with you today, Maddy, about what you've experienced. So why don't you start?
For me too, like it's so funny. I can text you, be like, if I'm watching a TV show, like, what type is this person? Or like, it's so cool. It's like helped me grow and understand it in such different ways too. So.
Yeah. Sometimes I'll get a text from you saying, I'm with my friend and she has this question about her type.
Exactly.
Yeah. So let's start at the beginning. How did you get into the Enneagram? How old were you exactly? And what appealed to you about the Enneagram? And how did you start using it in your life?
Yeah, I remember, it is funny because like, since you've been around my life, my entire life, an Enneagram has been in my parents' like circle and their like kind of the way they talk about things for my whole life. So I have like very clear memories of being in like elementary school or like middle school and being like, what type am I? Like, and everyone's like, you have to come of age and figure it out yourself. And I was like, like this is so annoying. And so I think like once I kind of finally like hit that age where I was like, okay, like I'm actually like kind of have this personality, know who I am to some degree, like I got super into it. And I remember you had those panels. So I went and it was just like so expansive. And I feel like helping to like understand myself, but also like other people, my parents, my teachers, my friends, like it added this like language around these patterns that I saw or didn't yet see that like allowed me to, I don't like it really helped kind of categorize like these patterns that I was noticing. I was thinking a little bit about this earlier this morning, and like I think it's interesting because I've had it through since I was 17 or 16 or around then. So I was thinking like I feel like as I've grown, it like when I was younger to some degree it helped kind of add this level of control, which maybe isn't as healthy, but it's like kind of like something that can happen, I think, in like as you in self kind of growth or observation to some degree. And I think like to like that, I'm sure I still use that just a little bit now, but I feel like as I've grown, I use it less as like a control mechanism of like being able to predict someone's actions or like how like kind of predict a scenario or something. And it, like as I've grown, it's helped me more understand where people kind of are and how to get out of that box versus like what the prediction of what they would do within the box. So I feel like that's an interesting kind of thing that I've been thinking about a lot, of like we all should be able to get out of our box, and like that is what I feel like I appreciate the most about it at this point. Like going through my 20s with this kind of language has been so helpful to to understand those patterns and kind of get out of it. So I know that was a little bit of a tangent, but I would say, and I think I've always been into psychology, and I'm definitely kind of a people person. So like understanding people and myself has always just kind of been something that I was drawn to. So it's so helpful to have this kind of right in front of me to like provide again that language to communicate about it.
Mm-hmm. That makes a lot of sense. And how did you find your type, and what type are you? What type and subtype, if you know it?
Yes. I'm still trying to figure out my subtype. I'm a 9, and I think that just felt pretty clear. Like I think once I saw the panels, which were so helpful. It's just that the energy of the types became so clear. Like despite people kind of being such different humans and having such different energies in some ways, like their answers are just like some sort of way that they responded to a question. Like I just totally resonated with the 9s. I remember like at some points just like laughing because it was like so like relatable to some degree. But it is also interesting because I feel like as I've really understood kind of those patterns, or the past like 10 years, I've really like actively been forcing myself like against those. So like I relate in some ways less and less to parts of it, but probably the more unhealthy aspects of the 9, which is a good thing, I think.
Yeah.
But then like I was listening to one of your podcasts like a week ago, and I was like, oh, that is so me. Like that is so like, oh God, cringe. Like I need to work on that. So it definitely like the more every time I dive in, I'm sure as I understand my subtype more, I'll have like another kind of set of the action items for myself to work on.
Yeah, it shows that when you say I felt the energy on the panels or the actionable things, that shows a little bit the body type tendency of being really
Yeah.
action oriented.
Yeah, the body type, like that hit was really, really helpful for me actually. Like the body type specifically, because it's so true. Like that just resonates in all aspects of my life. Like I have to keep, and this is kind of one subtype, but I have to have my routine with like my workout and I have to be active and like really do things consciously to like stay in my body, which I know other people don't necessarily feel, but for me that is so important. And I think in the past like 5 years I've really realized like how important that is for me.
Yeah, I think that it also shows that you, in the way that you came to the Enneagram, you had to experience it, which is also very
Yeah.
body typey. But one thing that I
Yeah.
noticed, and I'm curious to hear about you, B, what you think about what I'm going to say, is that as a 9, it's common that you will think about other people while you learn the Enneagram and involve them. But I think I smell something else here, that is the Gen Z millennial thing, which is whenever I start learning something, it's already relational. It's already something that I'm sharing, I'm discussing, I'm debating, and I'm out there, exchanging things. And that, I don't think this is how it was in our generation, B. I think basically we would dive deep into a book and stay with that for ourselves for quite a while and be amazed, and our aha moments would be a bit more an individual experience, and then we would share, but not the same ways that people like Maddy do. But what do you think, B? Is there a point here or not?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, or maybe we'd share with a smaller group. That kind of makes sense to me. Like maybe just a couple people. I'd need to think about it more, but I think you might have a point there. Maddy, can you give us an example of like something you saw in yourself after realizing you were a 9 that you were doing, that was sort of the important insight?
Yeah, it's definitely like my like trigger moment of like when I need to do something is it's like when I'm dissociating. So like that to me, like dissociation is like my absolute escape. Like that is when, like, and me and my cousin who's a 9 too, like we'll say it's like time to dissociate. Like it's kind of we've like joke about it now, but it's like the moment something's hard, it's like dissociation, click click. Like, but reality, like working away from that. But that to me, like really clicks. It's like overwhelm or fear or like anything. I definitely go into like ooh, like dissociate, kind of like need like nap, sleep, like those things. And actually for me, if I like do something to get into my body, that gets me out of that. So that was really, 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 I think one of those moments I was like, oh, that's why I feel kind of distant or separated or kind of that's what that feeling is.
I love that joking with your cousin about, oh, time to dissociate now. And it reminds me of a 9 friend of mine who said, oh, I'm feeling a little angry. I think I'll take a nap, you know?
I couldn't relate to that more. I'm like, I'm mad. I'm gonna go stare at a wall and maybe fall asleep. Like,
that's great. And it must be interesting too, because you were referring to the panels, and just to give people a little more of a sense of what that was. So around when you were getting interested in the Enneagram, it happened that I was doing in-person Enneagram panels with a friend of mine. We were co-teaching a set of panels around where you lived. And so like one night a week, we would do a panel, which was fun. And it must have been interesting because I remember your father was on the 9 panel.
yeah. Was my mom on the 5 or was it just
she must have been on the 5 panel. Yeah. Your mom's a 5, your dad's a 9.
Which is so 5 too. And I was like, I'm coming.
Yeah.
I have all my notes.
That's right. She didn't want you to be there. That's funny. Yeah.
Those panels were so amazing. That was really, really a cool experience for me.
Yeah. And it was great that you did that, being in high school, coming once a week to watching those panels.
I literally still have my notes. I think I can see them.
How funny.
Which is crazy.
And what's it like that your father is the same type as you, that he's also a 9?
You just stole my question, B.
Oh, sorry. I need to let you get in here.
No. It's just great. I was very curious.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like we're very different 9s. So like, I feel like I have like empathy and like we can relate to kind of like some of the high level, but I think our like the way it comes out is very different. And so, and actually one thing that I also noted to talk about was like getting into the Enneagram at such an, I think, early age really helped me develop this like muscle of like empathy or understanding. And I think that's also kind of part of, and my 9, that's kind of who I am to some degree too. But like at such an early age, I developed that muscles, which I am really, really grateful for. And I feel like is such a bonus for like getting into it when you're at the younger you are, like it kind of develops that muscle and you can just build on it. So I think in terms of my dad, it's like, I feel like we just kind of like understand each other's struggles to some degree. It's like, oh, but then I think we also get frustrated at each other because of the same reason. Like you also are like, you see the path, that you understand like what they're thinking and feeling, and you like want to figure it out for each other a little bit too.
Right. Exactly. And you might be different subtypes. I know that he's having a little bit of trouble finding his subtype with specificity also. Maybe we can work on that sometime soon. Yeah.
Yeah. We both need some help. But his is like, yeah, he is, we both like our patterns, but really different patterns. He likes crosswords. I want to like go work out or like lift or something. Like he likes reading. He's a little bit more like intellectual in that way, or like that helps his pattern.
He's a big reader, I noticed, which kind of makes me think might be a self-preservation dominant, because he often kind of sneaks off to read his book. Which isn't the thing that you see all 9s doing, but I often see him doing that. Like, where did he go? Oh, he's reading his book in the corner,
Maybe crossword that he hides under his chair. Like, funny.
Okay,
So
so don't talk about your mother because she's a self-pressed 5 and she won't like it.
Hey, stop. I love fives.
Okay.
They're the best. Should
Mm.
I? And then, yeah, I mean, it was the five like I feel like it was interesting because my dad and I had like in that way the same relationship with my mom. Like we both kind of I feel like had the same. It's like the pros and cons were both kind of similar.
Mhm.
But I feel like my mom is. I feel like both my parents are very. They both are like go towards self growth, and I feel like are understanding. And I feel like I'm so lucky in that way. Like I learned that from them.
Mm.
So I feel like both of them are like where there are faults, which there are none because they will listen to this. But where there are faults or things they want to work on, I feel like they're both, and we've all gotten, I think, so much better kind of together too, as like a family unit of communication. Like I think we're all going towards more communication, and like that has been like really cool, I think, to grow all together as well.
Right. Right. I like
Yeah.
that. It's like your parents kind of set the tone that personal growth and what you're
Yeah.
like is something that's good to be talked about in the service
Right.
of being healthy or something like that.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
I have a question, and that is a lot of people ask us, you know, what age should you tell your kid about the Enneagram? Or is it
Mhm.
good to talk about it with your children or teenagers? Like, are there pros and cons? And what would you say, having learned, like you say, having kind of grown up with it in the background and then gotten interested in it at a certain age? What would you say about, tell people about that?
I would be so pro. I would say yes, absolutely. Like in especially in high school, I think like that was just it was so and I said this earlier, but it was so expansive to like my just communication and like knowledge of people.
Mhm.
I think like the way but I think like and B this is very I think you have to talk about it in such a specific way. It's not like you're this person.
Mhm.
You're always going to be this person. This is who it's like almost like this is who you are. It's more like these are like the way you talk about it, I think is
Mhm.
really important.
Ah,
If you're
good point.
at all points, but I think especially at that, like if you're introducing it at younger ages, like being so clear about what really it should be used for versus putting so like 'cause I think that's a lot of like what I think me and my friends will get when we're trying to tell everyone about it. It's
Mhm.
like I don't want to be put in a box and it's really not about that. So
Yeah.
I think that's how I would feel about that.
Right, right. So it sounds like it's like a clear yes, like definitely you can share it with your kids, but it's the way you talk about it that's super important.
Yeah.
That it's not something that limits you or that, is something that you can't change or that is
Right.
something
Right.
that defines you from the outside in a narrow way, but it's more
Right.
something that helps you understand patterns and helps you understand yourself and other people and so
Right.
you can grow. And it sounds like in your case, and I'm really thinking about this for the first time as from what you're saying, is it really helps if the parents that are maybe sharing it with their children are modeling the right
Yes.
language to talk about it with, and also the way they might be using it with themselves, right? So if you see them being humble and acknowledging maybe some of their patterns or some of the things they need to do to grow out of specific patterns, that's
Yeah.
something that's more inspiring and it sort of sets a tone for openness and growth as opposed to limitation.
Yeah. And I would like add on to that too, like as I kind of said earlier with some friends too, it's like it's amazing for like humor as well. And I like have memories and like 2 weeks ago, like we're all at the dinner table and we're like kind of making fun at each other. Like it's like my dad will be like, oh, like that's such a nine move. Like it's also just super fun. And I feel like that was demonstrated early. So it was like it was never a bad thing. It was never this like dark thing. It was like you could poke fun or like and it's all just used for like kind of good growth. But it was also just like this demonstration, I think, of the way it was communicated again, like you said. But I always felt left out when I wasn't into it. And like I wanted to get into it so I could understand.
Mhm. Interesting.
Maddie, I would like to hear your opinion about something. My impression when I see millennials, and then when I compare to people of older generations, is that millennials are more prone to transformational work in average. I mean, not everybody. People are different, of course, from each other, but it feels like they are more interested in the changing and transformational side of the Enneagram. Maybe even more okay when they are challenged.
Mhm.
And not only knowing the Enneagram as a curiosity, like these are the 9 types, and they don't seem to want more of the same. They want something that is
Yeah.
deeper. But what do you think? What do you notice when you compare yourself to other people that are older, and if you have an experience of this when it comes to the Enneagram?
Interesting. I feel like I will say I feel lucky that I'm generally surrounded by people that are very focused on self growth, which I think is like I was so like lucky in that way. So that I think like even my grandparents, a lot of my grandparents are like very focused on that too, which is amazing. Um, and but it is I do yeah, so that is a little bit hard for me to compare to some degree, but I do feel like um almost like all of my friends, like everyone is like open for feedback or like open for like wants to be better. And I think you're right, like isn't just doesn't want to accept things as they are. Um, which is very powerful and also like makes life a lot more interesting because you can grow and change and nothing is permanent. And I feel like that maybe that's part of it. It's like nothing is permanent in a really like positive or kind of like inspiring way. I'm trying to think of an example, but you might have to give me a minute.
Of
I'll
course,
keep thinking on
of
that.
course. Yeah,
Mhm.
thank you for your answer.
And are most of your friends into the Enneagram? Like when you look at your social circle, do people know about it? Do they like it? Like, are there some people that don't like it, aren't open to it? Like, what would you say about your sort of the people that you're friends with?
I would say almost all my friends, every friend of mine knows about it because we talk about it, and it's like again like very part of our kind of colloquial. And a few of my friends are very very into it. So it's really helpful. It's been really helpful. Like we've used it to talk about like our other friends or understanding or like guys or it's been part of our colloquial since high school, which is so helpful in like even sometimes our like drama. It's like, but there are three and this person's a four and like how are we gonna like mend things? Like it's truly part of our colloquial. So that is again just like a language that is so so helpful. um I feel like, and I've talked to you about this before, B, but like some types are a little bit less, I've noticed, interested usually kind of initially, or like maybe intimidated of getting into it, or feel more like they're being put into a box. And I've
Mhm.
also noticed usually men have a little bit more of a guard up around it. Like they often are like, I don't want to be put into a box. Like that's the argument that we usually kind of get when we're trying to get our guy friends into it. But then a few times, like one of my best friends, Gavin, was like kind of against it and now is like all in. He's a six and he's like so into it. So like there have been a lot of those, and I think the more you understand like the actual purpose, like we were saying, like it's not like this daily horoscope that you get on your phone that's from like something silly. It's like really just something for you. You have to like do the work to research, understand. Like it's not just someone's going to tell you really what to do or like what your type is or those things. So I feel like the deeper people get, the more interested they get. But there's definitely like a blocker for
Mhm. Mhm.
certain people at least,
Mhm.
or disinterest if that's not really if if psychology or self observation, that journey isn't as interesting to them.
Mhm. Mhm. Would you say that the Enneagram has helped you deepen your relationships with friends? And again, it sounds like a little easier with your female friends for them to get into this than the men that you relate to. But how has it deepened your relationships, or how have you talked about it in ways that you think have been positive?
Yeah, I think, like I said earlier, it creates like this empathy of like understanding this other person's brain or like where they're coming from.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's so easy to feel like misunderstood, or like you're like, I don't eat, like, how could this person do this thing, like that is so crazy or mean or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think understanding at the core potentially what they're going through is really, really powerful. And like that I think has definitely deepened my friendships and like like all my relationships, because I can kind of come from that place of like, and if I don't understand, I want to understand. So it's like
Mm-hmm.
a lot of my close relationships are with sixes. So like understanding sixes really deeply has like been so helpful. And like, yeah, like, so I think that's kind of the key for me there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And your brother is also a six, right? He's
Yeah.
identified.
Brother, best friend, partner, like
Uh,
all sixes.
uh-huh. And how I think your brother's firmly Gen Z, right? He's in his early 20s. How have you guys talked about it much, or how do you see him being open to it or not?
Yeah, I think he's definitely, he is so into self-growth. It's really cool, like, and inspiring. Like, it's so amazing because I even think about myself at that age, and I was definitely not there at that level. So I feel like that's so amazing. I think he is interested in the Enneagram, but definitely not as much as me at this point.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think he's a little bit like toes the line, like, hasn't done a bunch of the research. And I think that is kind of one of the barriers, is there you have to get to the understanding, you have to take this like leap and kind of like read or watch, or kind of the panels for me were really like that piece.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's hard to just kind of like dip your toe in to some degree. Like, you kind of have to like step into the water.
Mm-hmm.
So, but he knows so much because he's just been around us, and I think he's aware of like some of his patterns that I made him aware of. No, just kidding.
I know we had a recent discussion where we were talking about the type 6 subtypes, and
Yeah,
he maybe got some insight into being a social 6 in a way that seemed like it was bringing some insights.
Yeah, totally. Like that, I think, was one of those like aha moments for him of like, oh, this is super cool. Like that, I really relate to that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And do you think there's anything about that you see that's a trend among the people your age that's sort of not good with the Enneagram, or either something they get turned off by, or something that a way that they don't use it well, or anything like that? Or do you think it's mostly positive?
I think it's mostly positive, but again, like kind of back to what I've been saying is like, when it's used again for like inside the box versus expand the box, like that's where I think I get concerned about like those any of those kind of posts that are so simple. It's like, you're this way. I feel like they're always just the framing of it should always just be a little bit more expansive.
Right, right, exactly.
Yeah. But I think overall, like, just I do think it's generally net positive. Get like understanding your own patterns, and just like, even if you see something you're like, that I really resonate with that, like that is overall I think a positive thing, since it doesn't always come up in people's daily lives.
Maddy, just as an add-on question, if I think of my previous question, do you think that Gen Zs are deeper in general in their interests, in their talks, and this is why they are more interested on the Enneagram?
That's interesting. I feel like they're, yeah, like I think to some degree, yeah, like they're like, millennials were kind of like stuck a little bit more in like the system to some degree.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like we're like kind of like breaking out of it, like, but compared to Gen Z, I think it's really different.
Mm-hmm.
Gen Z, I feel like really like enjoys breaking, which is like, what type are they as a whole to some degree too? Because like what they like kind of they enjoy the controversy or the, like the battle there. Um, versus I think millennials a bit more like, can we? Like, can I work from home? Or like, can I do this thing? Like,
Yeah.
how much should I know about myself? Like, does that make me weird? Like, so I think there's a little bit more of that, the questioning with the millennial versus Gen Z is the enjoyment
They just
of
dive
that.
deep. Yeah.
Yeah, as much as like very general that I can notice.
Of course, yeah, but as a generational thing, of course, there
Yeah,
is always
yeah,
it's always an average comment.
yeah.
And then, do you think that what you and your friends are looking for is really more in-depth material talking about the Enneagram, or also something that is more like practical and that you can apply in your immediate areas
Yeah.
of life? What do you think?
I honestly think both. Like there's a time and place for both. Like part of me wants the quick TikTok life advice, and then part of me wants to see that and be like, "Oh, I'm super interested in that. Like I want to go to a workshop
Right,
or I want to read a book about that." Like but so I think yeah, like there's definitely a place for both
right.
in most of my friends. I would say like in my circles, that's how we kind of exist at this point.
And we get lots of questions by parents of
Mm,
teenagers and young adults asking, how can I introduce the Enneagram to my kids? And
yeah.
what is the best way, the best approach? How can I draw their interest to this? What would you answer?
I would say I would some sort of panel or like seeing people, but maybe again, you're like you said, like the nine needs to see it and feel it, which is like so true and all and everything. But like for me, I would say seeing people, feeling that energy, like that was super key.
Yeah,
I think with reading material, it's really helpful to get deeper. But I think on like if you read a one pager, it's like you can get so much out of it, but you're missing like the it's like 1D versus 3D literally. And so you're like missing like these other kind of key aspects that I think were made it really quick for me to like understand a type. And even though I couldn't maybe have couldn't put words to what a two is and what their fears are or like those specifics, I could like feel like I knew what it felt like to some degree. So that I think like if there was some sort of like I always think if on TikTok, if you interviewed a certain type or like had those panel, like kind of really short clips of panels, like that would be so helpful.
Good idea. You're giving us some ideas. My next question that feeds into really well was how do you see the Enneagram in social media? Because I know people in your age group are really steeped in social media versus maybe the way I'm not as much into it,
Yeah.
or I'm not paying that much. I'm not on social media that as much.
Yeah.
How do you see the Enneagram in social media, and how have you sort of navigated finding good stuff versus maybe shallow stuff, and how it's been your
Yeah.
experience of that?
I honestly don't think the Enneagram content out there is very good
Mhm.
um, on social media right now. So I really I like follow some things or come up on my TikTok and it's usually okay, but I really don't think like if I didn't know about the Enneagram, I don't think I would get into it based on the social media that's present right now.
Ah,
Um, so when I'm looking for content, I go to my books or
mhm,
YouTube or like kind of
mhm.
more stuff that is B certified.
Well, thank you.
Like, yeah,
The mark of quality, yes.
yeah, yeah,
Good, good. So, I hope you don't mind me sharing that you have a big life transition coming up in the
yeah,
next couple of months. You're getting married.
yes,
Can you share a little bit about, how you've talked about the Enneagram with your fiance,
yeah,
or have you not, and what's that been like?
yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Um, Jack is he's so funny. He's a 6, and he's of course I can figure out other people's types before my own subtype. He's the counter 6. Is that the 1-to-1?
Yeah, the
I think it's
counterphobic 6, the 1-to-1 6. Yeah.
counterphobic 6.
Yeah.
So he's so funny because he's like he's into self-growth and all the things, but he doesn't want to show it always. So I'll be like, it's like, oh, like I'll be like, maybe you should work on this thing. Like I'm thinking about what I should work on. I'm like, this could be like your thing, and we're like, it's like all kind of jokey, and he's like mm-mm. Like, so like no, but he is thinking about it and does like take action on it. So like I feel like the relationship with self growth is very funny because I like want to talk about it all the time, and he's like, I don't want to talk about it, I want to do it. Like, and so it's like that's been really funny. But again, like, well, one, I know 6s so well, so like it was. I feel like I even when we started dating, like I felt super comfortable around him, and I felt like it was easy for me to like kind of like see some of the like understand some of those patterns, like where he was coming from, and even like talking to Laura, my best friend, who's a 6, and she's like, oh, like this might like when we were dating, she's like, he might be feeling this way because that's how I would feel, and so like that was really helpful too in that kind of translation. And I feel like he just knows about it because again, it's in my colloquial, so I use it like he knows it as well as I do. And I'm sure he knows it pretty well at this point, but doesn't talk about it as much. So again, I just think it's like such a helpful tool and in like providing that communication. Despite him not always like being able to like say the like the opposite, I think he knows where like what it means, or like it again like provides kind of that communication tool. Um Let's see. I'm trying to think of what else. I feel like I don't know if this is a thing, but I 9s and 6s. I feel so like I feel like we just 9s and 6s complement, I think, really well.
Mhm.
So our relationship really is like I feel like it's very easy in a good way. Like it's comfortable, which is like what both of us are looking for. But like can like I'm the kind of the more spontaneous one. He's the more like rigid patterns one. So we like to break each other out of each other's shells to some degree there, and like provide things. But it's also just like safe, comfortable, happy, which is amazing.
That's great. That's so great. I want to ask you about a particular type 9 pattern just to hear
Yeah,
like what's been your experience, and that is 9s tend to avoid conflict, and
yeah.
maybe have a hard time expressing their own anger. What's that been like for you? Like how have you seen that in yourself, and what have you done to work on that pattern?
That has been like my major journey over the past 10 years. Um, and I feel like I've come very, very far away. And I feel like I know like it's interesting as like as a 9, I feel my anger before I know what it is. And so like that is something that I think like Jack, for example, knows about me. Like if I'm like frustrated or like feel off, it's like I just need time, and he's like, and like just time to figure out what's going on, and then I can talk about it. But I might not have the words like immediately, and he just gives me that space. Like it's not like he's not frustrated. He just gives me that space to kind of like figure that out, which has been really helpful because I think with a lot of feelings for 9s, it's like I feel it, but I don't know. I don't know what it is yet. So like that, but even getting there was work for me too. So like getting to that point of like, okay, I'm feeling something and it's potentially uncomfortable. And I feel like for a long time, it was like, let it go, maybe dissociate, like ignore. But like getting to the point of being like, no, I need to figure it out. And I want to get to that point where it's just like more part of my, like the way I exist or think. And I feel like I'm very now aware, I feel like, of my anger, frustration, and really figuring out like what the exact feeling is. Um, and I do feel like there was a point where like it was interesting. I feel like at some point in my early 20s, I got really angry. Like I kind of hit this point where I was super like in touch with my anger, but almost like over. It was like, okay, but I also kind of need that 9 part back of like the empathy, the understanding. So it's kind of been this like curve where it was like really over understanding, which I think is great, but then kind of leveling back down of like figuring out what that balance to me looks like. And maybe anger with understanding is a better way to put it. But well, I had something else to say about it, but I feel like at this point in my life, I'm a lot better at conflict. I do almost kind of enjoy it at this point a little bit, because I've learned that I learned that it's productive and helpful. So I haven't had any really bad outcomes, I think, from it. Like I learned like, okay, wait, people don't hate you if you tell them you don't like the salad or like something like so like small and menial, but like I think I've trained myself to learn that it's a productive thing. It's not a bad thing. And so I think there's still things that I'm sure I keep in and don't let out, but I feel like I've gotten to a place that I'm a lot more comfortable with it, which feels great. For sure.
Yeah.
That's really good.
Yeah, well done. Amazing job, Maddy. And what would you say is your growth edge right now as a 9 time of life?
So many. But I think I was listening to one of your guys' podcasts and I was like, that actually, I think it's like understanding what I want. So like what do I actually want to do? Or like, what do I actually, even as small things, like I can just be so indecisive. And so right now, and again, like I've been working on that for the past 10 years, but I think more than ever, I'm in this moment of feeling like I really want to figure out like that indecisiveness and figuring out how to be more decisive.
That's great. That's a really important edge. And I'm feeling a little bit mischievous. And I kind of want to ask a little bit about what it's like to have a 5 mom, right? Because
Yes.
I know
Oh
there are a
my
lot of
God.
there are a lot of parents and children of parents out there, and she's a self-pressed 5, but maybe this is her growth edge to be talked about in public. But can you maybe say what's it been like to have a mom who's a 5, and maybe kind of a positive and maybe a challenge associated with that?
Yeah. I feel like growing up, I definitely felt it, I think, more. I think I like her. I'm not super boundaried and she's very boundaried. So like that combination, like I remember I would just have like friends over after school and I didn't understand. Like I was like, don't we want a house that's like warm, like full of laughter, like fun, like that to me was like so cool. And I think for her that was so like she didn't mind if it was planned, but if she didn't know, like that was so uncomfortable for her. So like understanding, like that's such a kind of small example, but like those boundary points was a challenge. But I think now it's so funny, like I don't know if that's also part of like life phases, but she's kind of the opposite. She's like gone, I think she's worked a lot on that and is like so social, constantly busy. Like I'm almost like, oh, I'm staying in tonight. She's like, what? Like boring. I'm like, who are you? It's fun to like to have seen her and my dad like really kind of grow. And I saw a TikTok yesterday that was like, you have to remember that like your parents, this is your first time, the first time your parents are living too. Like I feel like there's sometimes we have this conception that like our parents know everything and have always known everything and we're like born as parents. But like it's kind of this reminder, and I really feel like when I think about it, like that question reminds me like how much they've grown in the past like 10, 20 years and like really worked on kind of some of those edges. I think one thing that that me and my family are trying to figure out right now is like the balance. Like I'm joining this new family. Like now we have these two families combining, and so there's definitely, and Jack's family is from Palo Alto, so there's definitely kind of this like balance that I think is hard for a 9 because I just want everyone to be happy. But there's also like I think it's a good, and now I'm kind of going into my growth edge, but it's like another growth edge is like what do I want and how do I balance so that like all relationships are solid, but I'm also not extending myself too far.
Mm.
And so like I think there with both of our families too, it's like figuring out that balance, and everyone's growth edge probably lives somewhere within there around like what that feels like, you know?
Right, right. I can imagine for you, it's like, okay, there's all these, there's a lot of people now that
Yeah.
you're, having in your life. There's a whole other family and probably their extended system of
Right.
friends and family. It's like, how do you center on what you want,
Right.
in terms of
Exactly.
not just giving everybody else what they want, and now there's more everybody else's. How can you really kind of be in the middle of that really nice group and
In like
continue
a
to
good
say, yes,
right.
what works for
Yeah.
me, what's my preference,
Right.
in this
Right.
moment or in that occasion. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's my major. That's my major. Again, like yeah, figuring that out. It's interesting, and it's actually a great opportunity to work on that too.
Right.
Especially it's like we're so I think that what I have to remind myself is like I'm so lucky. Like we have two amazing families in these systems. It's like a great problem to have. So
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's an embarrassment of riches, as they say,
right.
and just
Totally.
and how do you just make the boundaries that you need as a person in your life, and as a nine who's sometimes challenged around making boundaries.
Right.
How can you
Totally.
continue to really tap into what feels right to you in your gut and what you really need and want, even while you have even more great people around you?
Exactly. Exactly. So I would say that's probably I feel like that's what we're kind of all trying to figure out right now.
Beautiful. Yeah. Again, good problem to have.
Totally. Yeah.
Ronnie,
Great
any
problem.
last questions from you?
I'm just delighted here with all that Matt is bringing to us. And I've always had this idea and vision be that the Enneagram belongs to young people and more and more and more. And I hope that, Maddie, you will uh, really take this in and keep going in your very clear leadership in spreading the word of this system.
Yeah,
I know.
it's exciting to me to see when I'm around Maddie and her friends, like how deeply interested they are in the Enneagram and how it's fun to talk about it. And I think the Enneagram really comes alive. I mean, books and information is really important, and certainly seeing panels where you're seeing people talk about it, but also talking about it with the people in your life. It's fun. Like you said, it can be funny. It can be a way of getting to know each other and teasing people a little bit as a way of nudging them into their growth path. Um,
Exactly. Exactly. That's so well said.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and I love the way I've seen you and your friends doing that. And again, the interest and the excitement when you talk about it or other people, or and like you say, it's a lot about understanding and navigating and having a language to talk about what's happening.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's like key. I love like make it fun. Like that is so like real and true, I feel like.
Yeah, yeah, and
And
go
I
ahead.
like the aspect of like I feel like books feel more definitive, but like in conversation, it's like you can come and not know anything, and like it's just like truly a conversation of like learning, like you're figuring it out all together too, which is like kind of the fun aspect of it. And I feel like in those like kind of fun conversations.
Exactly. And I think sometimes it's tempting to think that if it's fun and humorous, it might be too shallow or superficial, but I don't think
Yeah.
that's true at all. I think that,
No.
again, especially in the way I've seen you and your friends talking about it, I get that it's really deep and it can be
Yeah.
fun and light and funny at the same
I think
time.
it's so deep, it can be fun and funny.
Yeah.
You know, like
Yes.
I think so, like that's usually how I think about things. Like, you know, comedians, I'm like, oh my god, they're brilliant, you know, like where it's like things become funny when they're really rooted in truth.
Yes, exactly, exactly. And yeah, it goes both ways. It's funny because it's deep, and it can be funny. It can be a depth a exercise in knowing people at a deep level, even when you're
Yeah,
laughing together about it. And
totally. Totally.
I think, it's all about not being completely in your ego. And I think when we're laughing at ourselves, again, with
Yeah.
not in a mocking way or in a negative
Yeah.
way, but almost, we can laugh at ourselves because we don't take our ego so seriously.
Totally. It like forces you, I think what's like special about that is like it forces you to then separate this potentially like hard quality that you're working on. And it's like actually it's not bad. Like okay, everyone's able to kind of like laugh at these pieces of themselves that they're really maybe embarrassed of or ashamed of, and you like it totally reframes, I think, that part of yourself. And you're like, oh, it's like it's relatable. It's not that bad. Like it makes it less permanent again too, I think.
Yes, yes. And like you say, less kind of bad, less of
Yeah,
okay, something that I should be embarrassed about or ashamed of.
right,
No, it's just, I'm
right,
just human,
right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Actually, I do have one last question. Maddie, one of the definitions of Gen Z is that they do relationships more in the virtual arena and less in person. And I think I heard you say that you meet friends in person to discuss about the Enneagram. Is your experience that the Enneagram is a good thing to help people meet in person in your generation? Or maybe I'm exaggerating.
I think so. I wouldn't say we even like meet about it. It's just again part of our conversation too. So it's like if we're at lunch and discussing maybe something, like it'll come up. Like it's just part of the colloquial. Um, I think with millennials and Gen Z, like it has to be both. I think there has to be like I am texting my friends constantly. Like we are like so many of my friends live across the country, all over everywhere. So like we need a FaceTime, we need a text, like we're talking all the time. So I think it needs to be both usually, like both text, social media, like it has to kind of be everywhere and then just transfers when you're together in real life too.
Right. Yeah, thank you.
Makes a lot of sense. Well, thank you so much, Maddie. It's been really, really fun talking with you about the Enneagram and your experience of it. Really, really appreciate you. And I'm so proud of the way you've grown and the way you've incorporated the Enneagram into your growth path, which has been a beautiful one.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, guys. This was so fun.
Thanks, Maddie.
So much fun. Thanks, guys.
Okay, so that does it for this episode of the Enneagram 2.0 podcast. We hope you'll listen again next time when we talk about all things Enneagram.